What's going on, everyone? Gelman with Wellthy Stocks back with another Palantir update video where we take a look at Palantir stock, news that came out about Palantir stock, how it's been trading recently, and looking forward, what are our future levels of support and resistance. So real quick, if you enjoy videos like this, don't forget to hit that like button down below, subscribe to my channel if you are new, and comment down below what your thoughts on Palantir are, and I'd love to chat with you guys down there. So let me hit record, we will get right into it. So as we know, it was a wild week for Palantir. We started the week here in the 30s, dropped all the way to the 24s, and we are back kind of pretty close to where we started the week. So let's take a look at some news and kind of everything that happened this past week. Then we'll get back into the stock price, talk about, levels of support, levels of resistance, and what we could be seeing here. So let me go over here. So as you guys know, part of the reason for the rebound on Friday was because ARK Invest, Cathie Woods, bought a bunch of shares. They more than doubled their position in the company, their stake in the company, and added 5 million shares, which really helped put it up, right? So in an interview with CNBC, they talked about Palantir with Cathie Wood, and they talked about, with all kind of the ETFs that she, and that ARK run, right? And they talked about, what is great about Palantir. And what, Cathie talked about was, hey, they're talking about a massive space that they're in and the need to really grow aggressively and invest aggressively, right? So you don't want short-term Palantir has to make a certain amount of sacrifices, right? With earnings, with EPS, and everything to be able to ensure kind of that long-term growth that they're hoping for, right? So if you're short-term in your focus, you probably don't want to spend too much time investing in Palantir because, like they've said, right, they need a lot of growth in the future. And so the short-term numbers might not be as great as a lot of people want them to be. And that's what they're saying here. But to Cathie, that's music to her ears because they talk about, instead of saying, hey, let's get a profit short-term, what she really likes to hear is, hey, this is not what we want. She talks about it, short-sighted shareholders who are more interested in profits now, dividends now, and share repurchases now than they are in a company investing aggressively in order to catch some very big waves out there. So she's saying, hey, I don't care as much about short-term dividends, short-term repurchases, short-term profits. I care more about, catching a bigger piece of this pie as the pie gets bigger moving into the future, right? So she talks about, hey, Palantir's revenue are still 61% government, but then she says, hey, a lot of these innovations that we've seen over the course of our life, they've started in the government, right? In the defense sector, in the intelligence sector. And what they're talking about is, we need this increased competitiveness as we're going up against China. They talk about, and she talks about, another thing is saying, Palantir's attitude and spending time on the innovation and it is exactly how she wants them to invest. They want them to invest aggressively. They don't want profits now, because we're moving into a market where winner takes most. So if Palantir can be a winner in this field, right, providing the analytics services that they do, it's a winner takes most market, which means that, over the course of the long term, this bet will really pay off in Palantir's favor. And that's exactly why they're doing that, right? So as I talked about with my Tesla video for today as well, they added to their positions in Palantir and Tesla. In Palantir, though, specifically, like I said, they more than doubled their stake, taking really good advantage of the pullback that happened. So the other article that I want to talk about is the estimates and expectations, right? So what they're talking about is, this article, I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but they're talking about, hey, comparing them to the FANG stocks, right? So your Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Netflix, which I think it's a little bit of a stretch. I think Palantir is still in such an infant stage from a company perspective that I do think there's great potential in the company, but to compare it to, the FANG stocks is a little bit of a stretch. But let's talk about, what this article is talking about, right? So as we know, they're a software platform that can generate actionable insights from large unstructured data sets, right? And they've worked with the US government, and the military's using them, and big data solutions and artificial intelligence and systematic decision making. That's what they do, right? So great move for the stock. And they talk about, you know, performance as a benchmark. And in this, what they're talking about is a couple different things, right? They're talking about a net margin of 22% and revenue growth of 24 to 45%. Now, if you guys remember from my earnings video, we talked about the growth that they've experienced, and in 2020 that was closer to 2020 that was closer to 40%. But with the forward-looking guidance that Palantir provided in this previous earnings this past week, they're talking about a projected growth rate of 30%, which is still amazing, you know, for a company that's growing. But they're expecting a compounded growth of 24 to 45%. They reported $1.1 billion in revenue and a market cap of $54 billion. And so what they're doing here is they're, you know, talking about the returns over the next 10 years using the FANG median growth rate of 45%. And they're talking about, hey, this is the return that they're expecting compounded over the next 10 years, right? So absolutely amazing returns if you take a look here over the next 10 years, assuming it can keep growing at a compounded annual growth rate of 21%. Now, you have to understand that just this past Friday, Palantir stock went up 15%, right? So I definitely do think that this is possible for Palantir stock. Now, the key though is, as we'll take a look at when we take a look at the stock price, is it goes up and then it comes down, goes up and then it comes down. So it's still in that stage where there's, you know, large fluctuations, large movements. But for someone like me who is bullish on Palantir, I continue holding, you know, pretty much everything I have other than my short-term plays. As you guys know, I have shares as well as some leaps that I added to recently this past week. And with every pullback, it gives me the opportunity to assess, hey, is this a good point to buy shares? And that's exactly what I'm doing. So they do a couple different scenarios. They talk about, you know, a 21% growth rate, and they're doing a 12% growth rate, and a couple different, you know, things. But, you know, I think, you know, the purpose of this article and comparing it to the FANG companies is a little bit stretched in my opinion, but what it does really provide is a really nice insight into the projected growth, how that compares to FANG, and different kind of ways that, hey, if it grows this much, here's what your money could be worth, and if the revenue grows by this much, what the kind of multiples are, and the implied returns and the net margins and all that. So if you're interested, the title of this article is called, you know, Palantir Estimates and Expectations. It was published today on Seeking Alpha. Feel free to check that out. But they also talk about a little bit of the risks, right? They do have a great business model, but you also don't want to overpay. So, you know, always keep in mind valuations, which in Palantir's case, right, I think that's why I'm you know, long-term bullish on the company, like this article suggested. I do see the growth potential in the future, and that's why I'm, you know, really excited to see this company in the future. And then this article talks a little bit about, hey, how far up is it? What is talking about, you know, what it's talking about. And what I really like is, you know, they talk about buy long-term hold on this name in 2 of their portfolios, which again implies that they're bullish on Palantir. But it does a couple things. So it talks about Palantir's growth. It talks about the S&P growth. It talks about the ARK growth, which, as you can see, right, blows everything out of the water. Not necessarily to assume that this can continue, right? What you have to be realistic in what Palantir can returns. That kind of 20% compounded return over the next 10 years. That's still extremely bullish, but I definitely think that that's doable for a growth company. And they're talking about here, what I want to focus on is the fundamentals of the company, right? So if we take a look at December 31st, 2020 compared to December 31st, 2019, so exactly a year ago, we're talking about a 40% revenue growth rate year over year from 229 to 322 $322 million for Q4, right? This is for Q4 only. Again, everything going down here. So as a percentage of the revenue, what all the expenses are, how that's changing and all that good stuff. And then one thing that I want to focus on also though is that their, so revenue growth is up. What they're talking about is their gross margin they talk about here, and then their EBITDA margins, which is the earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. And they're talking about a negative 43% in 2019 and 10%. So this is something that they talk about is not necessarily accurate. But again, this is what I wanted to focus on down here with the net debt or cash. They've got $1.8 billion of net cash, but we could see them, you know, either issue new debt or equity to provide more cushion as they burn through their cash in their growth phase, right? So that's what I wanted to focus on here. But this article talks about a whole lot. If you guys want to know fundamentals, let me know and I can make a video on that. But I think most people would get bored and want to know more kind of the baseline. So revenue growth, EBITDA growth, net income growth, and all that good stuff, and the potential of an offering. So now let's get right into the stock. And if you've been with me for a while, you know exactly, you know, what we've been looking at. But here we were looking for a breakout. We got that breakout taking us from 25 to 35s. Then the next couple of days took us to 45s, and since then we consolidated. Here we talked about the rounding out, and we had a little bit of a run into earnings, but since then we've kind of been selling off. And then post earnings combined with, so post earnings with the miss, right? They were expecting a 2-cent EPS. We got a negative 10 cent, I believe, is the loss that we got per share. That sold off. Lockup expiration with a crazy number of shares coming into the market for people that could not sell before also came into the market, which took us all the way down to a low of 24.50. But then on Friday, we came right back up on news that Palantir was, that ARK was buying 5 million shares of Palantir, and they're doubling their position in the company. So we are right where we were pretty much we were right where we were on Wednesday after you know, dropping all the way to the 24s. If you guys remember, I picked up a leap on Thursday, talked about it in my video on Thursday, and already on Friday, you know, seeing great returns. So that's what I really like about the company. It is going up and down though. So we'll take a look at future levels of support, future levels of resistance for the company. The other thing that I want to point out real quick, and I've kind of been mentioning this since pretty much this level, is we could be making an inverse head and shoulder, right? So this is the shoulder, this is the head, assuming that over the next couple of days, we come back all the way to the mid to high 38s, and then we do this, the other shoulder here. We could see a little bit of a breakout after that, but again, it's too early to call. But so far, since I've said it, you know, the pattern continues to develop. So I figured I would share. Now let's talk about future levels of support, future levels of resistance. So let's talk about the downside first, get that out of the way, and then let's focus on the more exciting upside, if you will. So first things first, right? We were right here in the $28, $29 mark. Actually, we're exactly at 29, and we saw a nice push up in the after hours, right? Taking us to this 29.75 level. So actually, if we open up flat, we'll open up above this 29.47 level. So that would be my first level of support. And then if we drop below that, I'm looking at the 28.05, and then I'm looking at the 55 EMA at 27.48. And then 2680s. So again, that's my 4 levels that I'm looking at on the downside at 29.47, 29.47, 28.05, 55 EMA 27.48, and then 26.82. But if we continue a little bit of a push up, like we've seen, the first kind of key level to break is that $30 mark. 30.39 is kind of our level we have. So if we can break that, then I think, you know, it opens us up for a push towards the $32 mark with a little bit of a stop, maybe kind of halfway somewhere, but we'll see how that goes tomorrow. So again, looking for a break into the $30 mark, taking over the 21 EMA in the 30.70s, and then really pushing towards that 32.86 level. Since we went up 15% on Friday and another 2.5% in the after hours, putting us at almost 18% on the day, would not be surprised if we see a little bit of a pullback, establish a little base, and then we go up, maybe, you know, $1 or $2 before we go up, because that's definitely healthy for the stock after such a wild run. But if it continues, looking for a break of that 30s, and then continue pushing towards the 32. So bullish on Palantir, continuing to hold everything that I have on Palantir, including some leaps and some shares. Still building out my share position, not where I want to be, you know, in terms of my full position on Palantir. So still working to build that out, adding on pullback. So got a really good opportunity to add some here, and I was thankfully able to take advantage of some of that, but hoping for a continued push up this week, breaking the 30s and making a push towards 32 with the potential of a little bit of a pullback because we did go up 17-18% on Friday. So that's all I had for you guys today. Great, exciting week for Palantir, filled with swings either way. I hope you guys were able to take advantage of it. Let me know down in the comment section what your thoughts on Palantir are, and I'd love to chat with you guys down there. Let's remember to be a bit better every single day, and until next time.